I think one of the enduring legacies of the '08 Obama campaign, regardless of what happens in 2 weeks, will be a real change in the kind of talent that is running campaigns day to day. And so basically, by dint of Obama's charisma in 2007 and the fact that that campaign was always growing and always hiring more people, it just sucked in people from who had no experience in campaigns but had very interesting backgrounds and skill sets outside of campaigns. And to go back to what I said before, like almost every instance where campaigns innovate is because there's some sort of interplay with the outside world, whether it's academia or commercial marketing, and there's a kind of challenge to conventional thinking about how you solve a political problem. And so you get these people who are just streaming in initially often to volunteer for Obama, and then they end up getting staff jobs, often very junior ones, but they just have like amazing resumes or CVs. And so, in my book I have two characters, both of whom had studied econometrics. One was a graduate student at Berkeley at the time, who stumbles into an Obama field office before the California primary, which Obama is sort of only half-heartedly contesting, and they've made this odd decision that they're going to open up the VAN, which is the sort of voter database, to anybody who's signs up as a local field volunteer, I guess one of the neighborhood team leaders. And so this guy who had developed econometric forecasting models all of a sudden has access to all of this voter information. And he starts messing around with it. And interesting things start to happen. Another guy who'd been a student at University of Chicago, also studying econometrics, had gone on to work for an economic consulting firm, hated his job, was kind of intrigued by Obama, had never worked in politics before, ends up in Iowa as initially the voter file manager, I think was his title. Spends a few weeks fixing Word on people's computers because he's sort of seen as the tech guy. But eventually he's given a stack of these supporter cards, which the campaign is now sort of, with these pledge cards, has made a national thing, but it's in Iowa, because of the caucuses, people are used to voting in public, and so there's a culture of getting people to sign their names and promising that they will caucus for somebody. And so this was sort of the currency that the campaign collected when they went out and found a voter, said, okay, sign a supporter card. And so at one point, the director of the Iowa operation throws down these cards on the desk and says, enter these into the van. And eventually he's building game theoretical models, playing out what happens at a caucus, because you have this bizarre system which you guys probably forget about every 3 years and then remember. But in Democratic caucuses in Iowa, people don't only vote in public, but there are these weird thresholds where you need to cross 15% to qualify for a delegate. And he builds out this bit of software called caucus math that they load onto laptops and they give to their local person, caucus captain in each place, that guides them in each possible situation how to deny Hillary delegates, which is their top strategic objective. And so it guides somebody who has no idea of math or anything else in what places we, the Obama campaign, should throw 3 people to Edwards and 1 person to Richardson, and when we should try to cut a deal with Kucinich. That's something that no traditional person who'd worked on campaign after campaign would ever think of as the solution to that. They would have thought that you go find the oldest person who's been to the most caucuses in Indianola, and you make them your caucus captain because they'll remember what they did for Babbitt in '88. And his solution is let's actually solve this as a real problem. And that guy's now I always get their titles confused. He's either the data director or the analytics director. His name is Dan Wagner of the re-election campaign, and he is one of the 6 or 10 most important people in the political data worlds. And it was a sort of freak of his career and of the Obama campaign that he ended up in that position, and that the Obama campaign kept on growing and having the opportunity to give him more responsibilities. And that is and he's going to be around doing interesting things in politics for a very long time.
So new roles and new opportunities if you're just sort of in this now.
Yeah, I mean, politics, that everything I sort of said before about the pathological insularity of the consulting profession also means that it is ripe for people with expertise solving problems in other areas of human experience to apply that knowledge and skill to politics, because the people who come from politics are very rarely encouraged or emboldened to question the old assumptions. And so, the difficulty is, and this is where I think a presidential reelection is really different, is that a lot of people who have real skills are not going to leave their job to go work on a campaign for 4 months, not knowing, you're going to leave your job at Google or your tenure track position job at MIT to go work for 4 months on a campaign not knowing what happens on November 10th? No, probably not. But if you're a presidential reelection and you know you're going to be around for 2 or 3 years and you can offer somebody a real job for that time, like, it starts to become interesting to people who are drawn to the candidate but also see the possibility to do some real research in an environment where, if you're interested in working with data, there are very few places in the United States other than, secret intelligence gathering programs that we're not allowed to know about, where you are manipulating data about 200 million American adults at the same time, making predictions about their behavior. And so campaigns are kind of an amazing place if that's the type of thing that you want to deal with.